The difficulty of the task is only a measure of the opportunity to excel. This quiet affirmation by Admiral Chester Nimitz echoed through the humid, salt-stained air of the Solomon Islands in October 1942. At 23:45 on October 19th, Lieutenant Robert Lynch crouched behind the wheel of PT-48, his eyes straining against the absolute darkness of the black water off Cape Esperance. The air was a heavy mixture of tropical rot and stagnant diesel fumes. In the distance, 3 Japanese Daihatsu barges cut through the obsidian waves, their silhouettes barely visible against the starless horizon. These steel-plated shadows were moving 60 fresh troops and vital ammunition to reinforce the Japanese garrison on Guadalcanal. Lynch looked at the 4 Mark 8 torpedoes mounted on his deck, massive 2,000-pound cylinders of TNT designed to sink cruisers, yet utterly useless against these shallow-draft targets. In the previous weeks, 6 American boats had been lost attempting to stop these barges. The torpedoes simply passed underneath, while Japanese machine guns raked the wooden decks of the PT boats. Lynch was tired of failing. Welcome to the True Historical Channel. Please subscribe and hit bell icon. The battle for Guadalcanal in late 1942 was a desperate struggle for logistics. The Japanese Imperial Army relied on a steady flow of reinforcements and food to stay in the fight. This supply line was known to the Americans as the Tokyo Express. Initially, the Japanese used fast destroyers to deliver supplies under cover of darkness. However, relentless attacks from American aircraft at Henderson Field made destroyer runs too risky. The Japanese pivoted to a smaller, more elusive solution: the Daihatsu barge. These 49-foot steel vessels were designed for shallow water. They drew only 5 feet of depth, making them immune to the standard Mark 8 torpedoes used by American PT boats, which required a 10-foot minimum depth to arm. By mid-October, the situation for Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3 at Tulagi was dire. They had lost 6 boats and 17 sailors in futile attempts to stop these convoys. The mathematics of the war favored the Japanese. They were running 30 barges per night, each carrying 8 tons of supplies or 60 fully armed soldiers. Standard .50 caliber machine guns were ineffective against the barge's steel armor, simply sparking off the hull without causing damage. The Americans were losing the war of attrition in the dark. To break the stalemate, the sailors needed a weapon that didn't exist in the Navy's inventory. They needed a high-velocity, armor-piercing solution that could be mounted on a wooden hull. The Japanese barge crews operated with a sense of methodical security. They viewed the dark waters as their own private highway. To them, the American PT boats were a known, manageable nuisance. They watched the white wakes of torpedoes pass harmlessly beneath their hulls with almost mocking indifference. Secure behind quarter-inch steel plating, they expected the Americans to fire a few ineffective bursts of machine gun rounds and then flee into the night. They felt untouchable in their shallow draft armor, confident that no weapon small enough to fit on a plywood boat could actually sink them. For Lynch and his crew, the emotion was a burning, quiet frustration. They felt like ghosts watching a crime they could not stop. Every night, they saw the reinforcement of an enemy that was killing their fellow Marines just miles away. The sailors felt the sting of professional impotence. They were equipped with the Navy's most expensive torpedoes, yet they were effectively toothless. The Tokyo Express was moving with impunity, and the Americans felt the crushing weight of being technologically outmatched in their own backyard. They were tired of being the prey. They were ready to become the hunters. The solution lay in the graveyard of Henderson Field. Dozens of wrecked Bell P-39 Airacobra fighters sat in pieces around the runway. These aircraft were unique. The engine sat behind the pilot. This left space in the nose for a 37mm Oldsmobile M4 automatic cannon. This weapon was a mechanical beast. It fired 150 rounds per minute. Its muzzle velocity was 2,000 feet per second. Each high explosive shell could shatter light armor. On October 20th, Lynch surveyed 23 wrecks. He saw the cannons protruding from the hubs. No official orders existed for this. There was no Navy procurement plan. Lynch and his crew used cutting torches and wrenches. They stripped 3 cannons from the ruined planes. Each assembly weighed 280 pounds. Chief Machinist's mate Donald Fry designed a crude pedestal mount. He used scrap steel from aircraft landing gear. They welded the mounts in 5-minute bursts to save diesel fuel. By 2 a.m. on October 21st, PT-48 carried the first aircraft cannon in naval history. It was untested, improvised, and ready for war. The shift in the Solomons was immediate. When PT-48 engaged the first convoy on October 21st, the transformation of the barge-busting mission was absolute. Mitchell, the gunner, fired 90 rounds in minutes. The 37mm shells acted like a giant hammer against the thin Daihatsu armor. The lead barge exploded, its diesel tanks ignited, and its steel side shattered under high explosive impact. The Japanese crew realized their armor was useless. The Japanese radioed warnings about demon boats equipped with aircraft cannons. The psychological terror replaced their former arrogance. Before the cannon, PT boats were forced to retreat or risk being shredded by return fire. Now, the roles were reversed. The P-39 cannon turned a defensive, failing unit into an offensive force. By November 1st, 8 boats in Squadron 3 were outfitted with salvaged guns. The American sailors stopped being observers of the Tokyo Express and became its destroyers. This transformation proved that even a desperate, improvised modification could permanently change the balance of power in a theater of war. The 37mm M4 cannon magazine became the ultimate symbol of American ingenuity. In the P-39 Airacobra, these horseshoe-shaped magazines were designed for brief bursts of aerial combat. On a PT boat, they became the physical heart of a relentless new offensive. Each magazine weighed 40 pounds and held 30 rounds of high explosive fury. They were not just ammunition storage. They represented the bridge between 2 entirely different worlds of warfare, the sky and the sea. For the crew of PT-48, the magazines were objects of survival. They stacked them on the deck like precious cargo. In the heat of an engagement, the speed at which a sailor could yank an empty magazine and slam a fresh one into place dictated who would live and who would burn. These magazines symbolized the raw, urgent necessity of the Guadalcanal campaign. They were stripped from the bones of broken aircraft and repurposed in the dark, salt-sprayed waters of the Solomons. They proved that American democracy's true power lay in its ability to adapt, recycle, and weaponize every available scrap of steel against an overwhelming enemy. The legacy of the salvaged M4 cannon remains one of the most remarkable stories in naval history. What began as a desperate field experiment on a wooden deck in the Solomon Islands eventually transformed into official United States Navy doctrine. By January 1944, the 37mm cannon was standard factory equipment on all new PT boats rolling off the assembly lines in New Jersey and New Orleans. The transition from salvaged aircraft parts to precision-engineered naval weaponry proved that tactical survival often depends on the willingness to break the rules. The demon boats of the South Pacific did more than sink barges. They shattered the Japanese illusion of nighttime immunity. Lieutenant Robert Lynch and his peers demonstrated that true American power is not found solely in the pristine technology of the factory, but in the grit of the individual sailor who refuses to accept an impossible situation. Their improvised victory reminds us that the spirit of invention is our greatest asset. When the systems fail and the odds mount, the ability to adapt is the ultimate path to freedom. Dear audience, your comments encourage us to bring more real stories like this one. Please share your thoughts with us. Thanks for watching.